Hey folks, Edit from Brain Pulp TV, and another pre-release weekend is upon us, which means there are new Planeswalker decks, this time from Guilds of Ravnica, and today I'm going to be opening up the Vraska Planeswalker deck. It is Vraska, Regal Gorgon. Now, there's also the Raw Planeswalker deck. There might be a bit of a delay between this video going up and the Raw video going up. It's pre-release weekend, but the bigger event that's happening in my life right now is it's the anniversary weekend for me and my wife. So I'm gonna be spending a bunch of time with my wife, and I'm up to the wee hours of the morning trying to get this particular video done and out for you guys. So this video is probably being released on Saturday, and the Raw video may not be up till as late as Monday. So I do apologize for the delay between the two, but obviously family comes first, and I'm really looking forward to spending the weekend with my wife. So without any further ado, we're gonna crack this sucker open. I'm gonna show you what's inside. We're gonna go through every single card in the deck. I'll talk a little bit about how sort of the deck is meant to run, or how I see it's meant to run. And I might give like a couple of ideas as to how you could possibly improve it. Nothing's too thorough, but just like some base ideas. And then as sort of a cherry on top at the end of the video, I'm gonna be opening up the 2 booster packs that come in this box so you guys can see what pulls I got. So without further ado, let's crack this sucker open and see what's inside. Now this is a black-green deck, as you can see there, which is Golgari. That's the name given to that particular guild. Set the box aside. I think, yeah, okay, so the Planeswalker was already sort of loose. Move the packaging there. Now I'm going to go over the Planeswalker in just a bit. For now, we're just going to set her aside so I can show you what else is here provided with the Planeswalker deck. This is the packaging, so we'll just toss that over there. So as you can see, you have the deck box with some wonderful artwork and Vraska's name on the side as well too. Now, I know some people have had trouble getting sleeved cards into this. I use Dragon Shield sleeves, and I have no problem getting this deck back in here once it's sleeved with Dragon Shield sleeves. So it does fit that particular type of sleeves, but I know some people who've been using other sleeves have apparently had some trouble, but for the Dragon Shield users out there, this will fit in here with the sleeved cards. So we have the 2 packs, which I said I'll be opening up at the end of this video, and we have the fold out here, which usually has sort of like a glossary of the terms that you'll see on some of the cards, some of the mechanics. It's also got a bit of information on Vraska herself. Let's see, it's got also just an advertisement on the other end of this. Now it's Vraska. I think I always pronounce it Vraska, but it is Vraska. So I do apologize if I mispronounce any of these made up fictional names. So I will set this aside over here. And of course we have the deck itself, which I'm going to be cracking open in just a couple seconds. And like I said, we're going to be going over each individual card. Now, oddly enough, one thing I have noticed that is not here, I mean, there's a different sort of advertisement card. We'll take a look at that in just a second. There's no player guide insert, which there usually is with these, I believe. There typically is sort of like a rules reference card, but there doesn't seem to be one this time. So maybe they're saving on that. They're doing away with that. I have no idea. But they do have the deck here, and let's dig into that right now. Oh, and one quick note, the way I end up doing the overview for the deck here is I'm going to be talking about the creatures first, then the non-creature spells, and I'll be doing all that in order of converted mana cost. Okay, to start things off, let's talk about Vraska Regal Gorgon. Now, her casting cost is a hefty 7/5, a black and a green, gets you this 5 loyalty Planeswalker. Her +2 ability is put a +1/+1 counter on up to 1 target creature. That creature gains menace until the end of turn. This is a very, very creature-heavy deck. There are only, of all the cards in this deck, there are only 4 spells. Now, there are multiple copies of some of those spells, but the entire rest of the deck, other than lands and of course this Planeswalker, are going to be creatures. So her +2 ability is almost definitely going to be relevant and beneficial to you if you have her out on the board. I mean, there may be chances that by turn 7, when you can possibly get her out, you're not going to have a creature on the board, but with this deck, it's going to be highly unlikely. And just giving a creature menace on top of that as well too, till the end of turn, it can be very, very useful as well. Her -3 ability, destroy target creature. This is almost always a useful ability with a Planeswalker. Now, granted, you may not be playing against a creature-based deck, but if you're playing a Planeswalker deck versus a Planeswalker deck, just about every single Planeswalker deck that I can think of is at least partially creature-based. So this is a very relevant ability for her to have. -3 is going to put her down
to a loyalty of 2, but that shouldn't be too big of a deal because you are destroying one of the creatures, and as I've mentioned previously, this is a creature-heavy deck, so you should already have some blockers up. It does leave her a bit vulnerable, but sometimes even just having to bite the bullet and cast this as a 7-cost removal spell is still worth it when you're sort of late into a match. Her -10 ability, which, let's face it, you will almost never get a chance to use, is for each creature card in your graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Now, like I said, you're probably never getting a chance to actually use her ultimate ability, but this does sort of nod to one of the other themes in this deck, aside from just being a creature-heavy deck. The graveyard is very important to this deck, especially when it comes to having creatures in it. So you can actually benefit from having a lot or some of your creatures in your graveyard. There's going to be some spells and creatures which will immediately put certain cards in your graveyard. There's going to be other ones with the new mechanic Undergrowth, which are going to benefit from having those creatures in your graveyard. So overall, from a Planeswalker deck perspective, I actually like this Planeswalker. She's not super powerful when it comes to other Planeswalkers that are out there, but this is a Planeswalker deck. It's designed not to make the Planeswalkers meta-breaking, basically. So for a Planeswalker deck Planeswalker, she's quite good. She's definitely a better Planeswalker than I believe Ral is. I think Ral is still good, yeah, as far as a Planeswalker deck goes, though I don't like his deck as much. But I think Vraska, between the two of them, pound for pound, I think she is probably the better Planeswalker of the two. Alrighty, so now that we've talked about the Planeswalker, let's get into the creatures in this deck. Starting with the 2-drops, we have a reprint from, I believe, the Judgment set. It is Ironshell Beetle. It's a 1/1 for 1 and 1 green. But when it enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Now that does include itself as well too. So at its worst, it's going to enter the battlefield as a bear, a 2/2 for 2. But it can also possibly put that counter on another creature that you have on the battlefield. That will just leave it as a 1/1, but that's good enough to make it a chump blocker. And remember, you do need creatures, or you do want creatures in the graveyard for this deck, so that's not sort of a bad outcome when it comes to this card. And you're going to get 2 copies of the Beetle. The next 2-drop we have in this deck is Devkarin Dissident. For 1 and 1 green, you get a 2/2, so this really is like a bear, but it also has a mana sink attached to it. So for 4 and 1 green, it will get +2/+2 until the end of turn. It's not a tap ability as well too, which is very useful. And later in the game, when you have a more mana than you know what to do with, this is a nice little mana sink that you can have on the board, and it improves itself from simply being a bear. You're going to get just 1 copy of that in this deck, though. So moving on, still in the 2-drops, we have the first multicolored creature in this deck. It is Spore Shaman. A black and a green gets you a 3/1 elf shaman, and when it enters the battlefield, put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard. You may put a land card from your graveyard on top of your library. So this is useful in this deck for several reasons, not just because it's a 3/1, but because being able to take the top 3 cards of your deck, put them into your graveyard. Remember, you want creatures to a certain extent in your graveyard in this deck. As well, this can act in one of 2 different ways for you when it comes to land. Later in the game, it could be a nice way of filtering unneeded land from the top of your deck and just putting it directly into your graveyard, hopefully making way for a better draw ahead of that. Or early in the game, if you're hunting for land or you really need land, it might be something that can find you a land and allow you to then draw it your very next turn. So it's definitely going to be a useful card, and you are given 2 copies of it. So still in the 2-drops, I believe the final 2-drop creature in this deck, we have Swarm Guildmage, another multicolored card. It costs a black and a green to cast. It is a 2/2, but it has 2 abilities. 1, pay 4 and a black, tap it, creatures you control, get +1/+0, and gain Menace until the end of turn. Menace, remember, is the creatures can't be blocked except by 2 or more creatures. It also has pay 1 and a green, tap it, you gain 2 life. 2 very different abilities, but 2 useful abilities. Now, unlike the Dissident, you do have to tap this card to activate its abilities, but that's not really that big of a deal when it comes to this creature. The first ability, to give your creatures +1/+0 and Menace, is useful in the fact that it affects all of your creatures. So with a creature heavy deck like this, you're hoping to have a pretty big board presence when it comes to creatures on the battlefield. So this can go a long way to pushing a lot more damage through, especially when your opponent is forced to use 2 or more creatures to block each individual creature of yours attacking. The second ability is interesting because during a board stall, for example, you can keep using this ability on your opponent's end step to keep gaining 2 life over and over and over again each and every turn. Now, granted, yes, you can only use it once per turn, but even if the board stalls for 3 to 4 turns, that's 6 to 8 extra life that you're going to have, and that could be a huge difference. Now, I'm not normally a big fan of life gain cards unless the entire deck is sort of built around life gain, but I think this is an exception to my own personal rule because it's just a nice card to have on the board, which you can use for either its attack ability or the pseudo defense ability of just gaining 2 life each turn. However, they do only provide you with 1 copy of this card. Okay, now moving on up to the 3 drops, we have a rather vanilla creature in the form of Crawl Raider. For 2 and 1 black, you get a 2/3 Insect Warrior with Menace. We already talked about Menace. Not really much to say about this creature other than the fact that this is one of the cards that is exclusive to the Planeswalker deck, so you won't be able to find this in regular packs. You get 4 copies of it. Next up, we have Spinal Centipede. For 2 and 1 black, you get a 3/2 insect creature, and when it dies, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Once again, not a whole lot to say about this, other than the fact that you're going to get 3 copies. And then the final 3-drop creature is a multicolored creature, and it is Attendant of Vraska. For 1, a black and a green, you get a 3/3 zombie soldier, and when it dies, if you control a Vraska Planeswalker, you gain life equal to Attendant's power. This is one of the very typical type cards that you get with the Planeswalker decks. There are 3 cards in each of these decks, other than the Planeswalker itself, that is unique to the decks. This is one of them. It is a creature which is going to have a slightly augmented ability to what it normally would if you have your Planeswalker on the battlefield. Now, the ability may not seem like much, but given the fact that we've already seen at least one creature which allows you to put a +1/+1 counter on another creature before that one dies, you do have the opportunity to increase the power of the Attendant before it dies. So another creature which does have a bit of extra use as it's going to the graveyard. And you're going to get 3 copies of this card. Now, kicking off the 4-drop creatures, we have Barton Bats, which is a 3/1 bat with flying. This creature might be useful when it comes to attacks if your opponent has no way to deal with flying creatures, but its 1 toughness makes it super susceptible to just about any type of burn or -1/-1 effects. So it's definitely not the greatest creature. A very easy card to cut from the deck if you want to ever sort of improve this deck in the future. But there you have it, and you're going to get 2 copies of it. Next up, we have a green creature, which is a wild Ceratok. For 3 and 1 green, you get a 4/3 Rhino, and that's it. Cool artwork. I do like the artwork on this creature, but yeah, just a vanilla 4/3 green creature for 4. There you go. And you get 1 copy of it. Next, we have one of the few rare cards in the deck. It is Beast Whisperer. For 2 and 2 green, you get a 2/3 Elf Druid that whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. I always love cards that allow me to draw more cards. Beast Whisperer, good addition to this deck, given the fact that there are so many creatures in the deck. Barton Bats, for example, if you wanted to cut 2, you could put 2 more Beast Whisperers in the deck. I don't know how much this card is. I don't think it's going to be that much. They typically shy away from putting any cards with large dollar price tags in these decks. So chances are Beast Whisperer, you'll be able to get a couple extra copies for it for super cheap from your local gaming store and add it to the deck instead of something like the Barton Bats, which is something to consider given the fact that there's only currently 1 copy of this in your deck. And now we have the final 4-drop creature and the only multicolored 4-drop creature in the deck, Rhizome Lurcher. I'm going to pretend that is the correct pronunciation of this particular creature and just move on. It is a 2/2 fungus zombie. As well, too, it is the first card that you have seen so far in this deck that has Undergrowth. And in this case, that means it's going to enter the battlefield with a number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard. So Undergrowth is directly affected by the number of creature cards in your graveyard. Not just any cards, but creature cards specifically. Now, I'll admit that I wasn't super crazy about Undergrowth when I first read about it during spoiler season, but having played around with it now in Limited, I've really, pun intended, grown to like this particular effect. It's been super useful and impactful with just about every card that I played that has Undergrowth. So it is definitely something which I think fits well with this deck, given the fact that it's creature heavy. You're going to have a lot of creatures in your graveyard. You're going to have various ways to get creatures in your graveyard, and you're going to have creatures which are a benefit to you as they go to the graveyard. So if you're like me and you were sort of on the fence when it came to Undergrowth, or if you've never heard of Undergrowth before, you may be pleasantly surprised by how useful this and other Undergrowth cards could be in this deck, and you are going to get 2 copies of it. Moving on now to the 5-drop creatures, we have Dowser of Lights, which is simply a 4/5 horror creature. Just a vanilla 4/5, hits the board, adds a 4/5, stays a 4/5 until it dies. You get 1 copy of it. And here we have the final 5-drop, which is Crawl Foragers. For 4 and 1 green, you get a 4/4 Insect Scout. It has Undergrowth. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 1 life for each creature card in your graveyard. Not the most powerful Undergrowth card you could get, but still, I mean, it could definitely be useful, especially if you cast this really late in the game and you're sort of on your back foot. It may be the little bit of extra life you need to sort of push out that win when you were definitely staring down the barrel of a loss before it. You only get 1 copy of it though. And now to finish things off, as far as the creatures go in this deck, we have a 7-drop for 6 and 1 black. You get Lolith Giant. It is a 6/5 zombie giant. It has Undergrowth, and when it enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to target opponent for each creature card in your graveyard. Now granted, this isn't going to be the biggest bomb you could ever hope for when it comes to a 7-drop creature, but still, this could be very impactful in your match later on in the game. Not just as a 6/5 body, but you should have, at that point, a fair number of creature cards in your graveyard. This could actually end up being the killing stroke without ever having to swing in for attack damage. You do just get 1 copy of it in your deck though. Now, as I said, that was the last of the creature cards in this deck. We're going to go over now the 4 spells that you have in this deck, the 4 non-creature spells that you have in this deck, starting off with some 1-drops. We have Deadweight, which is a reprint from, I believe, Shadows over Innistrad, and I think it was in the original Innistrad before that. Probably some other sets that I don't know of, but still, moving on. It is 1 black for an aura enchantment. Enchanted creature gets -2/-2. Nice little bit of removal, or at the very least, something that can hinder a larger creature your opponent may have. You get 3 copies of it. Next, we have another bit of conditional removal in the form of a sorcery this time, Prey Upon. Target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. Each deals damage equal to its power to the other. Not my favorite bit of removal, especially when you consider the fact this is a green-black deck. Black's got so much good removal. Green has some much better removal than this as well too. Rabid Bite, for example, it may cost 1 more, but it's a one-way sort of damage street when it comes to that bit of removal. So Prey Upon, it's still useful. I mean, any sort of removal is good, even conditional removal like this. But that said, this is definitely not my first pick when it comes to conditional removal for this deck. You could definitely improve upon this if you wanted to. However, they do give you 2 copies of Prey Upon. Next up, we have another one of the few rare cards in this deck, and there is quite the CMC gap when it comes to the previous spell and this one. This is a 6-drop, 4 and 2 green, gets you Bounty of Might. It's an instant, and target creature gets +3/+3 until the end of turn. And you get to do that 3 times. So that can be 3 different creatures, that can be all in the same creature, but you do basically get to repeat this effect 3 times, all locked in to 1 spell. So it can be an incredibly powerful spell if you're able to cast it at just about any time. I mean, you don't need 3 creatures on the board. You can have between 1, 2, 3. You can have a whole bunch if you wanted to on the board, but this could be a serious game changer, especially given the fact that it's an instant spell. Cost a lot, but this is one of those cards which late in a game or late in a match could basically cost you the game, and I'm pretty sure this is going to be one of those spells that I lose to on the Mana Cave when we do face off against these decks. Bounty of Might, I'm calling it right now, is going to be one of the kill cards against me in that matchup. Anyways, we've got one last non-creature spell to talk about, and it is the final rare card in this deck. Vraska's Stone Glare for 4, a black and a green, gets you a sorcery, destroy target creature. You gain life equal to its toughness. You may search your library and or graveyard for a card named Vraska Regal Gorgon, reveal it, put it into your hand. If you search your library this way, shuffle it. Yes, it's the tutor cards that you're used to with these Planeswalker decks. For those of you unfamiliar, this could be your first Planeswalker deck that you've ever sort of seen a video on. Every single Planeswalker deck has a tutor card like this. Now, with the exception of the M19 Planeswalker decks, they've all basically followed this sort of template. It comes with an effect and the ability to search your graveyard and your library for your Planeswalker and put it into your hand. This allows you to be able to cast your Planeswalker, which you only get 1 copy of, remember, multiple times. Because if it's gone to the graveyard, this card will bring it out of the graveyard and back into your hand. You get another shot at casting it. Now, For the M19 ones, they did switch this up so that instead of looking specifically for the Planeswalker, and this is specifically for the Planeswalker in this deck, not for just a Vraska Planeswalker. It's specific to Vraska Regal Gorgon. But the other ones sort of switched it up to being a dig through the top 5 cards of your deck and take any card of a specific color, or in the case of the Tezzeret deck, either a blue card or an artifact. So there was, at least on my end, some speculation whether or not that was going to be the new face of these tutor cards. It is not. It's gone back to the original sort of form of the tutor cards. Now, when it comes to tutor cards, based on the examples that we've seen from the previous Planeswalker decks, this is probably one of the better ones. One of the best ones I can remember was from Angrath's deck, and that was, I believe, deal 3 damage and destroy target creature. This is very similar to that. Instead of doing extra damage, though, you're going to gain some life. But one of these Planeswalker cards that allows you to destroy target creature is very useful, because that's a useful spell almost at any point in a match. But one that allows you to do it and then find your Planeswalker. And remember, Vraska's second ability, her -3 ability, is to destroy a creature. So you cast this one turn, you get a Vraska into your hand. The following turn, you can cast her again and destroy another creature. So this could be probably among the best tutor cards that I think they've created so far. Now, it is sorcery speed, so you're not going to be able to do it like at any time or on your opponent's turn. But still, this could be a very useful tutor card when it comes to the Planeswalker decks, and you're going to get 2 copies of it in the deck. And that just leaves us with the mana base to talk about, which consists of 4 copies of Golgari Guildgate, which enters the battlefield tapped and can be tapped for either black or green mana, 12 basic swamps, and 10 basic forests. So there you have it, folks. That is the Vraska Regal Gorgon deck from beginning to end.
Okay, so now that we've talked about the deck, we are definitely going to be opening up these booster packs. But before we do that, there's a couple things I want to show you that was sealed up with the deck. Now, at the beginning of the video, I mentioned how they seem to have done away with the rules reference card, which was always included within the Planeswalker deck boxes. But they didn't actually do away with it. They just replaced it with these 2 cards here. Now, as you can see in this one, it talks about the various phases of a turn of magic. This one discusses how to cast spells, and on the other side, it has the ins and outs of attacking and blocking. However, these weren't the most interesting cards that were included with the deck. There was also this card here. Now, this is just an advertisement for their app, which is Magic the Gathering Portal. It's an app which apparently has a life tracker, rules for Magic the Gathering, a glossary, and also, I guess, a guide for people who are new to Magic. This is not the thing that I was really excited about. This is what I got kind of excited about when I saw what it was. Now, for those of you unfamiliar, Magic the Gathering Arena is the digital version of Magic the Gathering, which they recently came out with. Not to be mistaken for Magic the Gathering Online, which is also a digital version of Magic, but different than Magic Arena. Now, Magic Arena has recently gone into open beta, which means anyone can go ahead and download it and start playing it. And what this is a unique code for you, whoever bought a Planeswalker deck, to enter into Magic Arena so that they can play a digital version of this deck with their Magic Arena account. Now this is something I hope to see more of in the future, not just for Planeswalker decks. I would love to see these sort of inserts within booster boxes, for example, that give you free packs, and other decks, like if they come out with new Challenger decks as well too. This is the sort of thing that I really hope Wizards embraces and continues on with in the future. Oh, one quick note as well too, I will have already entered this code into my Magic Arena account, so for those of you who thought maybe you'd be able to get a free Planeswalker deck that way, I do apologize. It is already entered into my Magic Arena account. Maybe in the future, I will give one of these away as far as Magic Arena goes, but for now, this one I've already sort of added to my Magic Arena collection. So yeah, I was really excited to see this. However, enough talk about these inserts. It's time to open up these packs of Guilds of Ravnica and see what surprises they hold inside. Okay, so we'll start with this pack here. Now I'm gonna read off each of the cards because there's only 2 packs, and I'm gonna fully read off the, it feels like I'm damaging the, there we go. Didn't want to bend the cards there. I'm gonna read off each of the cards, and then I'm gonna fully read off the uncommons and then the rare at the end. So here we have Wall of Mist, Wojek Bodyguard, Take Heart, Dimir Informant, Wild Ceratok, Child of Night, Siege Worm with Convoke, which is one of the mechanics, which I'm glad to see back. Boros Locket. I love these lockets. I love the design of these. I've been playing with these in Limited on Magic Arena. So these lockets are extremely useful, at least in Limited play. I'm not sure if they're going to see anything in Constructed, but in Limited play, I really, really like these lockets. Then we have Notion Rain, Pause for Reflection. Our first uncommon is Swarm Guildmage, which we actually saw inside the deck, so I'm not going to read that off. Then we have Thought Eraser, which is a 2-drop sorcery, blue and a black. Target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-land card from it. That player discards that card. Surveil 1, which is look at the top card of your library. You may put it into your graveyard. This is a mechanic. Surveil is a mechanic that I'm pretty excited for to see how well it plays out. It seems like it could be powerful, and they're doing a lot of support with it within the set, not just from cards that have Surveil, but other cards which help augment Surveil or react well to other cards that do Surveil. Then our final uncommon is Flight of the Equinox, which is a whopping 8-drop, 7 and 1 white for a 4/5, let me pronounce that properly, 4/5 human knight, but it also has Convoke. So Convoke is your creatures can help cast this spell. Each creature you tap while casting the spell pays for 1 or 1 mana of that creature's color. Also has flying, which I'm not sure if I mentioned. And our rare card is Dawn of Hope. It's a 2-drop enchantment, 1 and 1 white, gets you whenever you gain life, you may pay 2. If you do, draw a card. Or you can pay 3 and 1 white, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token with lifelink. This is the type of card I like playing around with. I've been wanting to build a sort of white weenie soldier deck, so this is definitely one of the cards that I would like to sort of try out and something like that. So yeah, I'm kind of happy that this is one of the rares that I've opened up. Now we have Lesniak Guildgate, which is the land gate. It enters the battlefield tapped, and I can tap it for either green or white. And then we should have a token. We do, and it is a 1/1 soldier with lifelink. Okay, so now moving on to the second pack in the Planeswalker deck. I'll do the same thing. I'm going to read off all the cards. I'm going to fully read off the uncommons and the rare. So first up, we have Unexplained Disappearance, Cosmotronic Wave, Sworn Companions, Wall of Mist, Divkaran Dissident, which we saw in the deck that we just discussed, Vicious Rumors, Muse Drake, Selesnya Locket, as I mentioned before, love these lockets. I think they're a great design for a card. Deadweight, a reprint we talked about in the deck itself. Undercity Uprising, a card you can actually easily include in the Planeswalker deck. If you were to open up this pack along with the Planeswalker deck, you could augment the deck with cards like this. Our first uncommon is Guild Summit. For 2 and 1 blue, you get an enchantment. When Guild Summit enters the battlefield, you may tap any number of untapped gates you control. Draw a card for each gate tapped this way. Whenever a gate enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. Glaive of the Guild Pack. For 2, you get an artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+0 for each gate you control and has Vigilance and Menace. The equip cost is 3. And here we have one of the split cards. It's Discovery, which is 1 and either blue or black for a sorcery. Surveil 2, then draw a card. Or Dispersal, which is a 5-drop 3 and a blue and a black, gets you an instant. Each opponent returns a non-land permanent they control with the highest converted mana cost among permanents they control to its owner's hand, then discards a card. And our rare card is Omnispell Adept. It is a 5-drop 4 and 1 blue, gets you a 3/4 human wizard. It has the ability of 2 and 1 blue, tap it, you may cast an instant or sorcery card from your hand without paying its mana cost. Now, I played this once in Limited, but I never actually got to cast it and then use its ability. So it seems on paper, it seems like it could be good. Definitely there, I mean, you could build decks around it, but being able to cheat out certain instants or sorceries for only 2 and a blue seems like it could be powerful, but I'd have to play around with it more to know for sure. And then our gate here is Dimir Guildgate. You can tap it for blue or black, and like all gates, it enters the battlefield tapped. Oh, it's so late. I'm really starting to run out of steam, and my tongue apparently is not working anymore. And we have Elf Knight as our token. It is a 2/2 Elf Knight with Vigilance. So there you go, folks. That is the overview and opening for the Vraska Regal Gorgon Planeswalker deck. My overall thoughts of her deck is based on other Planeswalker decks. I think this could be a decent deck. This may be an interesting deck to play around with. We are going to be playing this against the Rawl deck in a future episode of the Mana Cave, so we'll see more how it plays there. But given the Planeswalker's abilities, the Tutor card's ability, and just some of the cards within the deck itself, this seems, from a Planeswalker deck perspective anyways, which has a different power level than other types of decks in the fact that it's weaker for the most part, because it is a product meant for newer players. This seems like it could be one of the better decks that they've come out with. Now, as for ways to improve it, just some base things off the top of my head. Get rid of some of the more vanilla creatures in the deck that don't have any extra added value when they enter play, and replace them with either extra copies of some of the cards you find useful in this deck, or even if you just want to stay within the Guilds of Ravnica set, there are a bunch of cards that would really go well with a Golgari deck like this. Now, Assassin's Trophy obviously would make any deck that has black and green in it way better, but 4 copies of that will also cost you 4 times as much as one of these Planeswalker decks. So maybe if you're on a budget, that may not be the best card, but there are definitely cards. Look for cards that have Undergrowth and anything that matches the colors here. Removal, specifically non-conditional removal. As I mentioned before, there is some conditional removal in this deck. Maybe replace that with removal that's not conditional, both in green and in black, though there's more of that in black. Surveil cards may also be good in this because they will allow you to not just sort of filter out what's in your deck, but also put creatures into your graveyard, which with this deck could be very, very useful. Now, I realize that's not exactly the most in-depth type of tutorial as to how to improve this deck, but I also haven't played with it yet. Maybe after a couple games during the Mana Cave, I'll have a better idea as to how to improve this deck, and maybe Travis will as well too. We can put our heads together, come up with some more specifics as far as what cards you could include in this deck to improve it. But for now, that is it for this video. So thank you guys very much for watching. Once again, just a reminder, the Rawl Planeswalker deck will not be out immediately after this one. It may be a couple days because I'm going to be spending this weekend with my wife for our anniversary. So you can keep a lookout for that, but it may not be out till this coming Monday. In the meantime, though, if you have any questions about this Planeswalker deck, or if you just want to tell me about how your pre-release went or what kind of cool pulls you got, please leave that in the comments section below. I'd love to hear from you. You can also follow and contact me on Twitter @BrainPulpTV. And now with all that said, take care everyone. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for all the support you continue to show Brain Pulp TV, whether it's simply letting other people know about the channel, watching the videos, liking, subscribing, all that does a lot to help support the channel, and I can't thank you guys enough. Have a wonderful day, night, morning, evening, whatever it is, wherever you are. May all your pulls be mythics, and I'll see you all again very soon.